Hope everybody's doing well. It's another edition of the online dinner party. And of course, as always, we bring you amazing guests and amazing conversations and all along those lines. And today will be no different. We'll definitely have some amazing conversation and some amazing thoughts and things that are happening in the world. I know that here in the Carolinas, it is definitely some spring like weather and it's definitely been on the warm side. And that's going to be the case now for a while. But, later on, we'll be hitting the summer months and it'll be downright humid because we are definitely known for our humidity. But that doesn't stop me from going to some of the outside events that I am part of as well. I just recently got a letter asking if I wanted to participate again in the festival of the Eno, which is a very popular festival at one of our state parks. And I think I've been doing the MCN there for probably close to 15 or 20 years. And it is something that I always enjoy, even when it's like 100 degrees on the outside, because it is at a state park. There are rivers nearby, there are water, mist, and other ways that you can keep cool. And of course, as one of the MCs that is also considered a performer as well. So we have access to the performance tent, which means that there is some good food as well as some good fruit, like some watermelon and definitely some of the other kind of things like cantaloupes and other things that can definitely help cool it down if it is a hot day and all along those lines. And there have been some times where the good old friend of rain has come through and has definitely cooled it down as well. So we'll see what happens in this particular year in July, as there was some rain earlier this week here in North Carolina. So definitely the rain may be a tool that cools it down. And as I was talking to a dear friend of mine not that long ago, it's about time for me to go do some trips around the world and to actually get out and about and actually enjoy some of the powers of what is happening in the world and to actually do more of that kind of thoughts. And definitely, I am one that believes in the language of coincidences and also in being connected to your ancestors, because there are folks that have moved on that I still feel very much connected to, be that my grandmother, who was one of the people that founded the first African American library in Raleigh, North Carolina, way back in the 40s. So that wasn't at a time that would be a easy challenge, but she did do that in the midst of those times, and definitely is one of the influences in my life, and still feel that she is influencing me, even though she passed away back in the 80s and all in that space, the early 80s to be exact. But definitely still feel her inspiration and her connection, just like I do with some of the entertainers and other folks that are connected to this area and being in Durham, North Carolina, that have passed on. I think about Freeman Ledbetter, who was a architect as well as a jazz musician, and how he was definitely an influential figure in my life, as was Baba Chuck Davis, who is very much known for his African dance styles that he learned from some of the African nations and brought to New York, North Carolina, and a variety of other places here in the area. And I considered him very much of a friend and a ally and somebody that was definitely in my corner, whether it was talking about the things that I do in the media or whether it's some of the things that I do as a event planner or a number of other things that go on in that space. And just last year, back in July, lost an uncle. And while he was more of a sports person, being an avid golfer, and actually one of the people that trained none other than Michael Jordan in that game, along with some other athletes from around this area. But he definitely influenced me and influenced others as well. And that's just some examples of folks that are in that influential space. And I bring all that up because the lady that I've got on today is very much about the power of coincidences, the power of miracles. And some people are wondering, do miracles even happen and are they real? And all in that space. So I've got Sophia Dimas here and all in that way. So it's very good to have Sophia here. And I know that she's got this book called The Divine Language of Coincidence. And some people will be like, oh, it's just coincidence. It was not really something that was kind of divine and all in that space. But I am one of those people that believes that we need to pay more attention to the miracles that happen around us on a regular basis, because sometimes we just don't take as much heed to them as we probably should. But I'll let you speak to that and some of your own thoughts because I know you have some of your influencers as well. So, Sophia, it's very good to have you here. And like I said at the beginning, there are definitely some ancestral people that have played a major role in my life and all in that space, even though some have been gone much longer than others. I mentioned that grandmother who passed away back in '82, and we're in 2023. So she's definitely not be here on this planet for more than 40 years, but I still feel that she has influenced some of the things that I do, and I would not be surprised if she is not a guiding force from the heavens above and all in that space. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about the power of miracles. And it sounds like you've had a very fascinating life, as I did mention that one of the people that was one of the folks that I admired quite a bit was the architect Phil Freelon, who passed away, I believe it was of Lou Gehrig's disease, if I remember correctly, but he was one of the creators, and some would say the main creator of the African American History Museum that is connected to the whole Smithsonian franchise and all along those lines. But he was a very proficient architect and one that used that architectural background. And it seems to me that you've done some of that as well. So I'd love to hear more about your history and some of the things that you are working with.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Well, with me, the miracles started to happen when I was 19. Mm-hmm. And when I was 19, I was going through some existential angst that I'm sure many 19-year-olds go through. Right. And what happened, it was overwhelming. The angst was overwhelming. And I just couldn't see a solution to the issues that I had. And within a very short period of time, I would say within 4 months, this man appeared. I was 19, he was 27. And it was because of him and a dream that completely solved my issues. And it was exactly what I needed at the right time. And it wasn't lost on me. So I began paying attention. And just throughout, it just seemed that I've been guided by these coincidences. And so my philosophy, because of my experiences, is that there is a divine intelligence, a higher power, God, name it what you will. And I believe that this divine intelligence knows better than we do what's best for us, and nudges us. It communicates with us through a lot of clever ways. But for me, what it's been is there's a coincidence. Now I can just go, wow, that's a real coincidence, or take action on it. So I had no desire to write a book. And these things just kept happening, and people kept saying, well, these things only happen to you. And it was a little annoying because, I'm not a special person. Like, I'm not a guru or a saint or anything. So, but, it was happening more and more. And the more it happened, the more I was tuned in. That's the only way I can explain it. And so a medium, actually, a medium, world-class medium, I had no desire to go see a medium. But as the universe would have it, I am face to face with this medium. And the medium told me that I was going to write a book. Wow. And I said, no, that's not in the cards. I said, I'm not writing a book. First of all, I have nothing to say. And two, I'm a people person. There's no way I'm going to sequester myself and write a book. And she just let me finish. Then she said, word for word, she said, Spirit says, when she's ready, there are many spirits here to help her and many hands on earth. So about 12 years ago, I was reconnecting with a childhood friend, and I told her my latest miracle, and she said, oh, these things only happen to you. And something clicked. It was like, well, these happen to everybody, but the the number of miracles was so amazing that I really started thinking about it. And what I realized was that when the coincidence happened, I would take action instead of just letting it go and remain a coincidence. So that prompted me to just really think about all the things that have happened to me. And I wanted to share that information with the world.
That makes a lot of sense. As you were saying that, a couple of things crossed my mind and everything is one is, do you think that we pay enough attention to the miracles when they happen or even observe the science? Because I am one that tries to remember the dreams when I wake up, but a lot of times the busyness of the day gets in and don't always, actually very seldom write down the dreams. And then later on, I have totally forgot the dreams. And some of them may have been some very profound messages that were put in that dreamscape and all in that line. And then another thing that I don't know what your thoughts are, but I've shared that with here on this network, and I've shared it before, and folks have heard this story, and they have not oftentimes had a counter. But we know that some 20 years ago, or more than 20 years ago, was a major disaster that happened in the sense of what mankind has done. Definitely, there are folks that will say something similar is going on with Ukraine and Russia, and that has gone on with the pandemic. But the one I'm referring to is 9/11. And at the time of 9/11, I remember hanging out regularly with artist friends of mine. There's a friend of mine that owned a gallery. It is still a gallery, but it's not owned by that same person at this particular time. But when that attack happened on the World Trade Center and the other parts of the United States that were attacked, I very much remember not seeing much wildlife, around. And there's plenty of wildlife here in North Carolina. You can definitely run across a robin and a squirrel and even occasional deer here, depending on where you are traveling here in this state and everything. And that would be including some vermin, like, the animals you don't want to see, and all in that space. But when that attack happened, it seemed, as I recall it, that the birds had disappeared, the animals had disappeared. It was almost as if that great power that you were talking about, the higher power, had sent a message to our animal kingdom that humans are about to get a little stupid. Y'all might want to go into hiding for a minute. Y'all can come back out when I tell y'all that it's all right to play. But right now, y'all might want to go into hiding. And when I have shared that story with others, including others in that city of New York and DC, they would pause and then they would reflect and they'd be like, come to think of it, Mark, I don't remember seeing pigeons, because pigeons are very common in New York. Or I don't remember seeing whatever animal they were used to seeing in their environment. Now, whether this is just some group think or whether that is something that I am just imagining some 20 years later, it could be, but that's the way I recall it. And I have yet to have many people give a counter argument, because it does seem like the animals got the message from above that it might be time to chill. And I would argue that they got a similar argument with the pandemic, when we all went inside and they came outside and played a little bit more than they are used to playing, because we were all inside and therefore they had more room to roam and do things of that space. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about that theory of mine.
Well, I just can't remember back then. What happened with the animals, but it. I mean, a lot of stories happened around 9/11. Right. People, surviving by obstacles that kept them from coming to work and all that. Yeah. So, but dreams, as I was saying earlier, the universe communicates with us in clever ways, and dreams is one of the ways that it communicates. With me, I don't remember my dreams. However, there were two dreams, including the one I told you about, that were three. There were a few dreams that have stayed, that have a message for me. So that's one of the ways, definitely.
Yeah, I can see that. And I know that you also created this program that is a interesting idea that more people should probably live by. But how did you think, or how would you suggest people live a fearless life? Because a lot of times people are afraid of things that they do not understand, and they will oftentimes live in that fear mindset. I know that there have even been times where folks, including myself, that have blamed themselves for things and will sometimes have that blame part of the fear as well, whether that's in a relationship, whether that's in a job, or whatever the situation may be. But how do we get out of that fearful tactic and live a more fearless life?
Okay, well, a little background. Okay, so I've had 3 careers.
Mhm.
And again, it's this external guidance. So in my case, this divine intelligence communicates through putting coincidences in my path and my intuition. So the coincidence happens, and then I decide whether I'm going to take action or not. So I went from architecture. So I worked in architecture for a decade. Then my last stint in architecture was designing biotechnology laboratories, which was challenging, but so far from beauty. So I got out of that and I went into fashion design. So I had my own fashion design business. And now it was more like at first it was like, I want to design the beautiful building. And then as I was working, a big influence in my life was Buckminster Fuller, who invented the geodesic dome. He was my idol. And as the universe would have it, and all of this is recounted in the book, I ended up working for Buckminster Fuller. And I mean, how does that work where you end up actually working for your hero, Right. And he was more into problem solving, like, eradicating homelessness, eradicating the shelter problem. So I became more into like problem solving with architecture. And so then when I was very far from beauty and I went into fashion design, I just wanted, I was going to design beautiful gowns for these beautiful women. Well, that got boring really fast, because, you could put a sack on a beautiful woman and she's still beautiful. Mm-hmm. So I had 2 great assistants, and we produced 30 magnificent evening gowns for maternity gowns. Mm-hmm. And we would rent them. So this is what kind of put me on the map nationally. And then large women. So it was like, but as this thing was happening, my friend was creating an event for at-risk women.
Hold on one second. Still continue your conversation.
So it was at-risk women, and she asked me if I would give a talk on how to dress for success. And that was a key thing for me, because I found myself saying to her, you dress beautifully, you do the talk on dressing for success. But there was something that was just eating at me. And I noticed that there was that clients of mine that were really beautiful women, with beautiful bodies, that had a problem with their self-esteem, and it was like not feeling confident. And then I had my large women, and they just were, here I am, just no problem with confidence. So I went back to my friend. I said, I'd like to give a talk on self-esteem. Mm-hmm. And that is that just got the ball rolling. And I went back to school, and when I was 50, I graduated with my a master's in counseling psychology. So I put this 12 workshop program together, and I needed a captive audience. So I had it piloted in the Philadelphia prison system. So I had these women, and it was phenomenal. I mean, the administrators said that even before the workshops ended, they could see a change of behavior for the positive. And that, it just, but they wouldn't give me the money. So the board would not give me the money. 32 men and 2 women on the board. So what I did is I got a grant from the Pennsylvania Development Association, and I did the women for women that are in alternative to incarceration, ex-trafficked women, ex-homeless women, and women in recovery. And it was just, it was wonderful to see them, that there's nothing really to fear, that, this fear that you were saying, it keeps so many people from moving from one career to another home, or to go back to school. And that's just has not been my problem, So I wanted to help other people just realize that a lot of these, I'm not good enough, that I'm not good enough, comes from childhood situations. So if you kept hearing when you're a child, you are nothing but a little piece of shit. If you keep hearing that, it's almost like the sort of primal part of your brain records it, and you don't even have to have anybody tell you that anymore. It's that recording plays back, and the fears come out.
Do the fears always just come from your parents and everything? Because, like I said, I know that I have suffered from that fear as well, of not wanting to go for certain jobs. Even at the age of 61, still being in the single space and not wanting to go after certain relationships because of that fear of failure. Now, I have parents that have encouraged me, just like they've encouraged my younger brother. So I can't say that it came from a parental fear. So I would have to do some deep digging to figure out where that fear came from and everything. But it definitely didn't come from the parents, because they were very encouraging, just like they're encouraging to my 2 nephews and all in that space. And part of it might have been the frustration of rejection, because I know a lot of times none of us like rejection. So it might have been some of those early rejections and taking them too much to a heart and letting them weigh in on me, because I have brought up on this show and I brought up on other shows where there have been jobs that I am probably equally capable as those that got the job. But, you have that internal conversation where it's like, should I go for the job? Should I not go for the job? Should I go for the job? Should I not go for the job? And by the time you had that internal conversation back and forth with yourself, the job has gone. So there's no need to worry about it. You've already internalized yourself out of said job, whether that be arts administration or a number of other kinds of jobs that even in the media field, that I have probably talked myself out of.
Okay, then I have to ask you a question. So you get rejected. Mm-hmm. So what?
I mean, that should be the answer, is so what, and you move on to the next step and everything. But yeah, sometimes you start weighing in on yourself as, why wasn't I good enough, or why wasn't I this or that? And you can also play into your own disabilities and your own services. You don't know this, but I have, and it wasn't discovered till later in life, I have a thing called dysgraphia, which is like a form of dyslexia, meaning that left and right in me are not always friends. So I'm not a person who gets around by car. I get around by mass transit and other things in that space. So I'm sure that has been part of the conversation as well, as how much do you bring that up in the early stages of the conversation. So I know that I've done that to myself as well.
Okay, so I'm going to recommend a book.
Please.
Okay. So, and this was part of my program.
Mm-hmm.
And the book is called The Four Agreements. I don't know if you've heard this book, but it's by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Mm-hmm.
And I maintain, it's a thin little book. And I maintain that if everybody did the Four Agreements,
Mm-hmm.
every therapist would be out of business.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I mean, they're very simple. And if I said them to you, you'd probably go, oh, I don't need to read a book to know this. But it's really interesting. And I'll tell you the Four Agreements. But reading the book, it's in a circuitous, it's written circuitously. And so it introduces a new thought and then goes back and repeats and then new thought. But the Four Agreements are: one is to be true to your word. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so you tell the truth, you and whatever you say, you do.
Right.
Okay, and you only use your word to encourage and not to discourage.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's one. Two is do not assume.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, do not assume. It's like, let's say you hear something, you get offended, and you're going to react. Instead of reacting, you just say, well, what did you mean by that?
Mm.
That's it. What did you mean by that? And then the third one is don't take anything personally, because it's not about you. And if you don't get the job, okay, so, you're going to get another, you just pursue, you keep pursuing. Right. And then the last one that helped me a lot, because I did some pretty things I'm not proud of in my youth, Mm-hmm. And so the fourth agreement is do your best. So I can, instead of feeling guilty about what I did, it's like, well, that was the best I could do at the time.
Right.
Now I'm different. Now it's different. Okay. But from my experience, to me, it's clicking into that divine intelligence. And in my first book, The Divine Language of Coincidence, How Miracles Transformed My Life After I Began Paying Attention, it was so it's a memoir. So pretty much all the miracles are chronological, but except for 2 chapters, and one is titled Please, which is about prayer, and the other chapter is Thank You, about gratitude. Mm-hmm. Okay, and now I don't even pray. I don't even do prayer anymore. I just ask. And the miracles that happen in those 2 chapters are more thematic. For example, in the Thank You chapter, these 2 events happened years apart, but the 3 things they had in common was a homeless person, a few days before Christmas, and a $20 bill. Mm-hmm. And the result of these 2 experiences was the gratitude that I felt was overwhelming. It was, I would say, like life altering. So what, and those are just 2. I mean, there's, I don't know. Have you heard of a Course in Miracles?
A Course in Miracles? Not that I'm familiar with. I'd have to think about it. I might have heard of somebody mention it, but it doesn't ring a bell to me. That's the word I was looking for.
Okay, well, that's also in the book, because I literally tripped on this book, and I resisted. I resisted for like over 2 years reading it, even if it was slapping me in the face. This person told me about it. This person gave it to me for my birthday. I would not touch this. Well, no, actually, after I ran it, actually getting a pamphlet about this book, I decided, well, I was visiting my mother in Oregon, and coming back on the plane, after I had finished my Vanity Fair, I had no other reading material. So I had the pamphlet. So I started reading this pamphlet, and I'm like, okay, so everything negative is rooted in fear. Okay, and the antidote to fear is love. And I'm like, okay, I can buy that. Okay. And then there's the ego that wants you to separate, to be away from people, and then the Holy Spirit to connect. Okay. And I'm like, okay, this sounds good. Okay. So I come back to Philadelphia, go to the bookstore. I take one look at this book, and it has those thin little pages like the Bible with numbers. I'm like, I'm not touching this book. So anyway, 2.5 years it took for the final slap. Okay. And so my friend gave it to me for my birthday, and I put it under the nightstand. And when I was starting my dress designing business, I woke up in the middle of the night, and it was kind of like the money situation. Mm-hmm. And oh no, it's like I had the asset column here and the expenses over here. And I'm like, how can I make it? Oh my God, just starting this panic thing about the money. And I was almost going on a panic attack. And something said to me, just get up, turn on the light, and grab a magazine. So I turned on the light, and there's no magazine. And I'm like, I was desperate. And I got the book, and I opened the book, and there it said, in so many words, lack is not part of your life. You have everything you need. You know, there's love, and there's this, and there's that. And I mean, I hadn't even gone to halfway down the book where I could feel tears of gratitude of what I had. Right. And I thought right there, okay, any book that can bring me from panic attack to tears of gratitude in one page, I don't care. I'm going to drink the bitter medicine. So, and one of the reasons I resisted was that there's no author to this book, that it is channeled. And it's Christ-based. But I was at a meeting when 11 Jewish women were talking about taking the hand of Jesus, which, surprised me. And so it has guided me. But you have to be open. You have to open your mind just a bit for, these things to happen. And so it's the opposite of the Four Agreements. This is big, thick with little thin pages, and the other one is this nice thin little book. But each one is a true guide, life guide.
And speaking of guides, I know another thing that you oftentimes talk about, which I know a lot of people have a hard time with, and sometimes it's a hard time even forgiving yourself and everything, which is this notion of forgiveness. Because I know there have been parts of relationships where I have been a part of the guilty party, just like I'm sure that there are parts of their senses of what they were doing, the young ladies, that they were guilty as well. But whether it is me forgiving them or me forgiving myself or the whole notion of forgiveness, I do find that is something that we as human individuals have a very difficult time with. And I don't care whether you're in Eastern society or Western society, it just seems that we have a hard time with this notion of forgiveness, even though it is very much a part of many a spiritual journey, because I know it is definitely talked about quite a bit in the Bible, but it is also talked about in other books of spirituality as well, whether that be the Quran or the Torah, I think is the one that the Jewish people practice, and even some of the Buddhist and Eastern religions talk about forgiveness. So I know it is a common theme, but I don't know that it is a theme that is addressed well even in our education system, because sometimes I don't even think the teachers forgive their pupils enough and all in that space. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about this notion of forgiveness.
Well, you just touched on one of my favorite subjects. All right. So first of all, back to what you were talking about, having maybe have some responsibility in ending the relationships. Okay. So I would say exactly what I said before. Well, that was the best you could do. Okay,
Right.
Mark, at the time, no need to feel guilt. You learned the lesson. You're not going to do it again.
Right.
So that's one aspect of it. But so okay, this is it's in the book. So one day I was working in Center City, and I took my lunch to Rittenhouse Square, and I see 3 benches, and one of the benches has a book on it. So of course I'm going to go to the bench with the book. So I sit down and I pick up this book, and the title of it was something like, "Who told you you were naked? You were born naked," or something. Right. And I look on the back, and it's written by a Trappist monk who was also a student of the Course in Miracles. I thought, okay, book on the bench. It's okay. So I read the book. It was one of the most beautiful writings on forgiveness. And so when I I sort of meditated on it. My first language is Greek, so I thought of the Lord's Prayer in Greek, and I realized that the word forgiveness is not in the Lord's Prayer in Greek. So the Bible was written. The first time it was written was in Greek. Even though Jesus spoke Aramaic with his disciples, the Bible was written in Greek. So I went line for line on the Lord's Prayer, and there were some nuances there that are just completely lost in translation that are so important. And so what I did is I retranslated the Lord's Prayer from Greek to English to capture those nuances. So when it gets to forgiveness, instead of forgive us our trespasses or whatever, it says like free us from
forgive us our trespasses, forgive us our sins. I'm trying to remember the Lord's Prayer myself, but yes.
Right. So let me think of it in Greek. Okay, it's free us from our and I want you to do it properly. So free us from that which keeps us from what we've done wrong. Right. Free us from guilt. Free us, and then we free those who offended us, and then we free those who offended us. So free us from our offenses as we free those who have offended us. Okay. And to me, that is true forgiveness, because you could do something to me and then I can say, okay, Mark, I forgive you, but don't you ever forget about it.
Right.
Or I can go, oh, Mark, look, we all make mistakes. Okay, let's just wipe the slate clean and just start over, and it never happened. Now, do you feel a little difference one to the other?
No, yeah, definitely, because the notion of wiping the slate clean is a better idea than the kind of still having it hanging over you, which is what the other way is still hanging over you to some degree or another.
Right. So I have that translation in the book because it's really, there's so many other nuances. Like, for example, our Father who art in heaven. Okay, in Greek, it's plural. It's heavens. So my translation, and I have a problem with the patriarchy of religions,
Mhm.
and so my translation is our Creator, who resides in sound, light, and vibration. So this intelligent being is in all realms, many heavens. So it's these nuances, and I think it's a prayer that anyone can say. I don't care if you're, Muslim or Buddhist or whatever. It helps you to tap in, and also and my book is not intended to turn people into believers. Okay, so I'm not trying to convince people. It's just basically, well, this is what worked for me, so I'm sharing what worked for me. So you can, take it or leave it.
No, and I think that that's the mistake that certain religious folks make and everything. Because I liked what you just said about multiple heavens and multiple things. I actually had the pleasure of interviewing somebody, and this was, I think, about a year ago, that had a post-death experience, and they actually told the story of having been up to heaven, and what they saw was a heaven that was made up of multiple people of multiple faiths and throughout the area. So it wasn't the only the Christians that were up there, or only the Muslims, or only this or that, but it was truly a paradise, in the sense that a lot of people of different ethnicities, well, and different would have been different ethnicities down here, because I'm sure up there is
Is
all
that,
about the light and everything, but it's different ethnicities down here and different denominations and different religions. And I sometimes think that our religious institutions get too caught up in the my way and the highway attitude of whatever their religion is. And I think that that isn't just a Christian thing. I think that there are a lot of religions that do that, and that
yeah.
and the cult of personality, because a lot of them also get caught up in the personality aspect of their ministers and their leadership as well. So that's one of my issues with the overall big religion and everything.
Well, that's the mistake, and when I first did my book proposal, I had to do a marketing plan, and
Mhm.
so like what was my target market and what was not my target market.
Right.
And what I put as my not target market were the evangelicals and the atheists.
Right.
But I was pleasantly surprised because, well, I don't know any evangelicals really,
Mhm.
but I know a whole slew of atheists. And so it was very interesting because there were 100 books, and I gave it to 10 atheists, so 10% of my books.
Mhm.
And they had to fill out a questionnaire. And so all 10 loved the book.
Mhm.
All 10 said they would give it to another atheist. But all 10, in so many words, said, oh, these are not miracles. It was like, these are manifestations of your all-powerful mind. Even though they're external things, these, I manifested them, and then somehow I cleverly, grasp them, and these are my achievements, and I have no business crediting God. Well, I think that's stranger than God, because yes, you can manifest things, but a lot of people are into this manifesting, what they
Right.
want.
Right.
And I just have gotten to the point where I always, like, I'll say what I want, just say it, and then, but whatever's best,
Mhm.
because we don't know what is best for us. So that's for me the guiding light. So as I have continued to have these experiences, all I do is just say, oh, I just ask. Why? It's not a big thing. It's not a big prayer. It's just I ask for what is best, and then when it happens, I just all I can do is express gratitude, and so that's how things are manifested in my life, and so that's what works for me.
Okay, that works for you, and I can definitely see that working for a number of folks and all in that space, and I can definitely see that. But I definitely think that there has to be when I look at the beauty of nature, and I'm definitely a
Yes.
person that is a believer in nature and feel connected to nature in a lot of ways, then there has to be explanation for how it came here. I don't think it just popped up out of the middle of nowhere. So I think that's where my argument about there being at least some sort of God force out there has to exist, because I just don't see it happening without having been created from something. I just don't see it like just popping up out of the middle of nowhere without there being somebody that helped create it and everything, or some power that helped create it. But
well, my experiences could not have happened without that intelligence.
Right.
It just could not, happen. And what's really interesting, so basically, okay, so that's my first book on coincidence, and my second book that's coming out September 5th. When I sat down to write the book, I didn't know how to start it. And so what I did is I made a list of the coincidences in my life and then the miracles. Mm-hmm. And what the action I took that I got the miracle. And they were just too numerous to cram into one book. So what I did is I plucked out all the ones that had to do with death. And I mean, and those are the stories. Now, I think what you alluded to was somebody that had a near-death experience, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I did.
Okay, so those are NDEs, and scientists have been studying them for decades. Okay, I just recently found out that, and I knew that there are scientists that are studying consciousness, mm-hmm. but what I found out recently is that there are scientists that are actually studying coincidences. Mm-hmm. And then most recently, I found out that this field just opened up. It's after death communication, ADC. So just in time for my book, because the story. So I have 10 chapters. 7 of the are full of experiences that I had, and 3 are close friends. And I really don't know which one is the strangest, but just in time, this field opened up just in time. And so what I'm so excited about is that both books now have gotten the attention of scientists. So I don't know how this is going to unfold, but again, I just ask, and then whatever I receive, I say thank you.
Yeah, because I want to say, and that's what I was just looking up, because I knew that I am around the corner, but one of those leading research facilities isn't that far from the apartment complex that I live in, because I actually live near Duke University. And of course, a lot of the research in parapsychology, as they like to call it, and psychic and dream experiences is the Ryan Research Center, which of course is based in Durham and has been based in Durham ever since '65. So it's almost getting ready to celebrate, what would that be, like almost close to 60 years, right? 2025 would be 60 years that they have been doing this research as an independent research center and all in that kind of space. But they've been doing a lot of research. I've even known some friends of mine that have participated in some of their sleep research and some of the other types of research that they do at that particular facility and everything. They say that we don't tap into enough of our consciousness and enough of our thoughts and everything. So I'm of the opinion that there are probably everyday miracles that take place on a regular basis, and sometimes we just ignore them as the norm or whatever, and all in that space. But I'm just wondering your thoughts as to whether we pay enough attention to the coincidences and miracles that exist, and is it something that we ignore because it's seen as being too mystical and all along those lines, and we are afraid to admit that they happen on a regular basis. And part of that is the religious aspect of miracles, because some religions do not want to credit certain miracles that take place as well, because they haven't been ordained as being correct miracles, whatever a correct miracle is.
Well, first of all, the definition of a miracle in a course in miracles mm-hmm. is simply a change of perception for the higher good. Okay, so mm-hmm. just for example, 40 years ago, I believed in capital punishment. I was like, just kill them, get them off the street, get them off we don't have to feed these people, just kill them. And I'm completely, my perception of this is completely changed the other way. I mean, even if somebody, hurt or did something to a loved one, I could never say, okay, at this time, I want, put them to death at this time. I just, it's a whole different, so according to the Course in Miracles, this is a little miracle. Okay. And also, the book says that there's not a big miracle or a little miracle. Okay. So all the miracles, whether they're big miracles or little miracles, they're all miracles. And I can give you, do you want me to give you a couple of examples?
Yeah, definitely want to hear the examples. And before you get to examples, one of the things that I've always heard, and I could be wrong, is that there are 8 billion people in the world, which is a lot of people, or whatever the exact figure is, but let's say 8 billion plus people in the world, or thereabouts, maybe a 7 billion plus. Either way, there are a lot of people in the world. But if you do the math of sexuality and everything, every birth is a miracle. And I know that a lot of people, including parents, and I am not a parent, but they would say that that is very much the case, because there are many a person that has tried to have children that can have children. So while there are a bunch of us here in the planet, there is a miracle every time that a baby is born, and all in that space. So that
absolutely. To me, it is a mystery. I have never given birth. I have an adopted daughter, but that is how I have viewed birth. To me, it's just a mystery. And you have, and it's interesting to me, sort of getting to this point where you just accept that miracles are accept, that they're real and they're accessible to anyone. It's a process, kind of getting to that point. There's just this process. Now, one person, for example, that was a complete atheist, an avowed atheist, and was Francis Collins. And Francis Collins, his team got the Nobel Prize for decoding the DNA helix. And I read his book, and it was the beauty of this discovery that made him go completely the other way and is a Bible thumper now. So, that's what he needed, to say, okay, this can't just happen arbitrarily, So I mean, it's just inexplicable to me. I mean, I still might, I'll tell my friend, oh, you can't believe what just happened. And I'll tell her the latest miracle. And she goes, but you wrote the book. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I am astounded every time it happens.
Miss Demis, just out of curiosity, because I used to practice this habit. Some people would say it is a bad habit. Some people would say that it is being superstitious and all along those lines. But how much do you think that we can control some of our own destinies and our own miracles and everything? Because there have been times where I have felt uncomfortable in a situation and everything, and I might remember that a cup was not in a particular location, or a salt shaker wasn't in a particular location, and in the course of whatever is going on, I might try to disrupt what was happening as I recalled it and everything by shifting maybe some of that energy and some of that narrative by moving things. And some people are like, no, that sounds a little too hocus pocus and too little bit like a person that is paranoid, but it has worked in my space sometimes, and it has definitely got me out of what was a uncomfortable dream as I remembered it, because I might be in a deja vu moment, and all of a sudden it might be a scary deja vu moment. I'll be like, yeah, I don't remember this being there, so I'm going to change a little nature of what I recall to see if I can change the narrative to some degree.
Well, again, I feel Okay, my motto, the way I live my life is not to control things, okay?
Right.
Because um, again, we don't know what's best for us. Okay, so let's say I want a red Ferrari,
Mm.
and I want this red Ferrari really, really bad, and there's all these obstacles in my way. In my way, I can't get the loan. I can't do this. It won't. They can't find a red Ferrari. Okay, or whatever.
Right.
And then, but I have free will. See, that's the unfortunate thing. We were given free will. Okay, so I'm going to get this red Ferrari come hell or high water. So I get the red Ferrari. I'm driving home from the dealership and I crash and die. And so I'm just saying that, if I had listened to the obstacles, because sometimes the universe puts obstacles instead of miracles,
Right.
I would, I would have been saved from this, So um, to me, my motto is sort of let go, let God. So my thing is let go and let God do the cooking. I'm bringing the ingredients, okay? And so the minute we come in, because we have to take action, okay? My mother used to say, "Did I tell you about the drowning man?" And I'd say, "Yeah, like 20,000 times you've told me about the drowning man." She goes, "Well, let me tell you about the drowning man." And she'd go, "Okay, so this man is drowning and he's yelling to God, 'Help me, God, help me, God.' So God says, 'Fine, I'll help you, but move your arms a little bit.'" So the minute we take action, okay, we become co-conspirators with this divine intelligence. We co-create. And then the miracle, whatever you need, is put in front of you.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I can definitely see that kind of conversation and everything. Definitely want to hear about these other miracles that have happened in your life. But I did have a question that was somewhat unrelated, but it does deal with one of your other careers and all in that space because a couple of various questions were running through my head as you were talking and everything. But I mentioned having friends in the architectural field. One, Freeman Ledbetter, that was very much into what some people call green architecture and all in that space. And of course, Phil Freelon designed that very modern kind of building that is the African American History Museum there in DC. I think he was the principal designer, or at least he was one of the principal designers, and all in that space. But sometimes when I look around the cities, whether that's here in Durham or whether that's in places like Philly, where I believe you are, and a number of other places that are around the world, it does seem like we've got into very much of a cookie cutter mentality in terms of architecture, and it frustrates me. So, as one that was a former architect, I was wondering what your thoughts are about modern architecture, because I'm sitting there going like I was always wanted to ask an architect and can't ask Phil because Phil's not here anymore, but I've got you here. So I was just wondering your thoughts about the nature of modern day architecture, because it does seem very cookie cutter in my mind in a lot of places. Not saying that
Well,
there
it
aren't some
has.
innovative.
It is, and it's the quality is
Mhm.
completely different. And I mean, there are these star architects like Buckminster Fuller or Gehry, or these people who create art,
Right,
or something completely different, and
right.
they exist. But overall, yes, I agree with you.
Yeah, I definitely was thinking about that, how it can be very much too much cookie cutter. But you mentioned Buckminster Fuller before, and you mentioned that he was into tackling some very difficult issues and everything. And I had the pleasure recently of interviewing a young woman that forego her medical profession. She was going to medical school, moved up to Black Mountains, North Carolina to become a farmer, and is definitely doing some things in the wellness space. You mentioned wellness and mindfulness space, and is doing stuff in that kind of lane and with the environment. And like I asked her, I sometimes wonder, when we have these great minds, do they ever sometimes feel that they're tilting at windmills? So I'll ask you the same thing, because a lot of the issues that he was dealing with are still issues today, and I don't see any cure around them, including homelessness, which I don't understand why we have a homeless problem in what many people would say is the greatest country in the world, and historically has been one of the greatest countries in the world. But we've still got this vast amount of homeless people, including those living in tent cities. But I was just wondering Your thoughts as to whether, because you worked with this man, did he ever get frustrated with trying to tackle some of these big issues, or did he feel that he was going to come up with a solution at some point or another?
He was the biggest optimist in the world.
Okay.
He was clicked in. This man was clicked in. In fact, I tell his death was he and his wife's death were the most romantic deaths I have ever been privy to. I mean, he was just clicked in. That's all I can say. But he was a complete optimist and this absolutely brilliant mind. I mean, it's there's a little book that talks about it's a biography. It's called what is it? Is it called? It's slipped my mind, but it's a remarkable life, that he had.
Yeah, it sounds like it. As you were thinking about that remarkable life in that space of remarkability in the whole space of architecture. The other thing that you mentioned earlier, you mentioned your admiration of geodesic environments and everything. And my dad, who is a artist of note here in this area, and you can go to bambooturtle.com and see some of his work that is very geometrical and other things, but is also very nature related, because he might have pictures of insects and other things that are there and everything. But when I was a kid, my parents did a couple of amazing things. One, they formed a radio station when I was a preteen. I think I was about 14 or 15 when they decided to start a radio station with no radio background of their own. Mom was trained as a guidance counselor, and dad was trained as a engineer at North Carolina State, and they had some military training as well in the Air Force and all in that space. But they were frustrated by not hearing enough minority voices, not hearing enough of the music they loved, which was jazz and blues. So they started a radio station with no radio background, and it's lasted for 12 years and all in that space. Dad did a farm cooperative called And a Mule, which is a play off of 40 acres and a mule and everything. And he also, I want to say it was outside of Raleigh, built a geodesic home. So he literally built a geodesic home. We never moved into it, but he was in the process of building that, and we definitely had some fun. I want to say I was maybe a preteen or something, and I'm sure it got destroyed or was eventually moved. But yes, he was in the process. He's a big fan of Progressive and Mother Earth News, and I think it was something that he decided he was going to try. So he built a geodesic property, and he's even now thinking about setting up a event center in Durham, and I would not be surprised if that doesn't have some geodesic abilities to it as well. But yeah, when you mentioned geodesic properties, that made me think about that. Like, I haven't heard many people talk about geodesic properties, but they are existing and they can be very fun to look at, and in some ways they can be a precursor to some of these tiny homes and energy efficient homes that we're hearing about in the more modern day time. So I think that they were a precursor to those, but I don't know your thoughts as one that was a fan of geodesic properties.
Well, what the philosophy behind the geodesic dome was that by using lightweight tubes, it's covering more space with less material. So that is kind of the idea, that you can have a large space with lightweight materials, and do it affordably. Yeah. But the thing is, what you were saying, okay, so he was doing this. I worked with him. It was in 1979. But there's this element of human nature, and people who, a lot of people who haven't had sort of the spiritual journey and derived their satisfaction from power and money. Okay. People want power and money, and they don't care that that children can go hungry, or Social Security is going to be cut, or anything like that. It's what can they do to get more power and money, and that kills. Because Bucky believed that starvation could, be overcome. Homelessness can be overcome, but when there's policies that doesn't allow, the creation, or the government to, so it's bad government. Well, it could be good government. I mean, look at, I think Finland has just this beautiful system. People love, paying up to 50% of their income to taxes, because look what they get back. They get free, excellent health care and free, excellent education. So, I mean, what's wrong with this nation that I know people in their 60s, they're still paying back their college loans. I mean, why? Because if it's not a moneymaker, it's not going to be put through, you're just not going to have it happen, because the power and money people, want more. So therefore it's like, then we're going to, pay attention to the corporations, because then, if you cut their taxes, then they can make more money, and it's just sort of back-asswards,
No, it's totally backwards in that sense and everything. Because as you were saying that, I was thinking about here in North Carolina, there is a large part of our business narrative that includes tobacco, but it also includes mainstream pharmaceuticals as well. And a lot of times those pharmaceuticals aren't doing anything to help folks. They're just looking at the bottom dollar. And I personally think that whether it is adults with certain medications and kids with Ritalin and other medications, that we have become a over-medicated society, and a lot of the things that we are medicating are things that should be normal. Because if you show me a kid that is not hyper to some degree, I'm gonna actually be wondering about the kid in the first place, because most kids have a level of hyperactivity just by being the nature of being kids. Right. And all in that space. That's just what I've observed from my nephews and other kids that I've had the pleasure of working with at cultural arts centers and other places. So I do think that we sometimes over medicate it, and that's one of them corporate types that have had too much control in my mind, because they exert too much influence. And I don't care whether you're on the right or the left of politics. I think that they just exert way too much influence. But I don't know if you agree with me or not on that, but that's what I have.
Well, I think, big pharma, does some good things. Okay. Mm-hmm. But big pharma was able to get the vaccines out, right, or whatever. But also it's all about money too. Mm-hmm. When I was at an agency doing mental health counseling, right, okay, the clients there were they were government, like they were getting food stamps and money from the government. And I can tell you that there's this just proves the point, I think. So I could tell when the client first came in, if they had anxiety or depression, because the big pharma was sending representatives every 2 weeks on a Friday, and they would bring lunch. And they would bring lunch, and then they would talk about this drug. Well, the psychiatrists in that agency only dispensed that drug. So if the person had anxiety, then it would kind of work. But then the people with depression would come in, and they would, like, their eyes would be rolling around, and I'm like, And finally, one of the psychiatrists quit. This woman, this Korean woman, quit because she couldn't do it. She wouldn't do it. So every once in a while, there's somebody with integrity that, no, I'm not doing this. So yeah.
I definitely agree. One of the other things that you mentioned, and there was a major designer and a major icon that was from this area in Durham that was part of that same industry, that being Andre Leon Talley and everything. But I was just wondering your thoughts as to the state, and I know it's a kind of widespread question, but how are you feeling about the modern take on the fashion industry? Because that was another part of your journey as well. And like I said, I did have the pleasure of meeting at least once, maybe twice, Andre Leon Talley, and he was definitely a larger than life figure. That is no doubt about that and everything. But I was just wondering, of course, he was the editor at large at Vogue and a number of other jobs that he held there as well. But I was just wondering your take on the nature of the fashion industry.
I am sorry, I cannot talk about that because, I mean, once the pandemic came, fashion for me went out the window. I mean, I knew I could just take a look at a dress and tell you exactly who designed it. I have lost all sense. I don't think I'll ever buy another piece of clothing again. So it's not something that I follow. Mm-hmm. So I can't, it's out the window for me.
No, that's fair enough. Like I said, I just knew that was part of your journey in terms of careers, but I also know that sometimes people, as you said, they move into different careers and they don't necessarily have the same thoughts that they had in the past time. So like you said before, there was probably a time that you could have remembered some of those great designers and admired some of their work.
Oh, I knew them all. I mean, so, but that was, was part of my job to follow that. But now I can't tell you who's doing what.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense and everything. I don't know if you ever had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Talley, but like I said, he was definitely larger than life the time that I met him, and he definitely did some work with Chuck Davis, who was also larger than life as well. But speaking of larger than life people, one of the folks that I did see that you listed as one of your personal influencers, and I know he's been dealing with his own health issues and dealing with the hospice care and everything. But I just wondered if you could share your thoughts about Jimmy Carter, because I was an admirer of Jimmy Carter even when he was president, and I have totally been an admirer of his humanitarian work. And I did see that that was one of the people that you had put as somebody that was one of your personal influencers and all in that space.
Yes. So President Carter and I had correspondence going, and I asked him about, his, where he was with his religion, and because he was a nuclear scientist. Right. I don't know if you know that. And he said, I have no issue at all. No, there's no problem with science and my religion. I find what he has done in the world. I think the Carter Center is a must go to destination. I mean, this man has devoted his post-presidency to making the world a better place. I mean, he's eradicated diseases in Africa, like the guinea worm, paid attention to voting rights. And that's another, when you think about, again, power and money, it's he goes to these other countries to make sure that there's unbiased voting. And look what we're having in this country, this war about, how to keep people of color out of the voting booth, how to keep the youth. The youth is our hope. And one Republican senator said something like, we're making it so easy for these kids, to just roll out of bed in their dorms and go vote. Yes, we have to make it easier, not harder. And so I feel like we're at a precipice with our society and the fear of losing our democracy, that I just hope that, the good prevails. Okay, that's all I can say.
No, I definitely agree. And one of the things I was talking about on another show is we've gotten into this whole notion of this concept of otherism, where there is a fear of the other and what they could be doing, whether that is around sexuality, around gender, around weight, around a number of other things, including education, and all in that space. I personally wish that we would get out of that otherism mentality, kind of almost like self victimhood and all in that space. But I just love to hear your thoughts about that, because it does seem like even with the pandemic, we saw a bunch of otherisms and people that were divorcing each other over different stances. And always been of the belief that we can agree to disagree. Doesn't mean that you have to agree with me 100% or I have to agree with you 100%. But I think that some people get too caught up in their my way or the highway attitude. That is part of my problem with certain religious folks and everything, because I think that they get too caught up in the my way and the highway attitude as well. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, because that is something that frustrates me about not just America, but the world in general.
Well, but there are some things that, again, power and money. I mean, it's. I have to say that I take the highway instead of, going along with this. All that matters is power and money. I mean, I can say that brings on, that just brings on, pushes people that have less money away from, because power and money is it. So it's a class thing that happens. Mm-hmm. Instead of welcoming everybody to, for diversity, you have this, keep them separate. Keep, again, the ego, keep everything separate, and just the power and money. So look, I see nothing wrong with wealth, but it's what you do with it.
No, I definitely agree with you, and definitely what you do with that wealth. And there was a thing that I used to do DJing on a regular basis. I may get back to doing it with a couple of stations, and there was a blues shows that I did, so blues music, and one of the songs that I used to play regularly was Just to That Notion, which was the punchline within the song was that they had never seen an armored car at a funeral yet, which basically implies that you can't take the money with you, so you might as well do something positive with the money if you're going to be making the money, and all along those lines. So that's a line that I remember from that particular song. I wish I could think of the artist and everything in that space. There is something that I used to watch regularly. Well, I've got to ask you a somewhat joking question, and then I'll get to the more serious one, because I used to watch Quantum Leap, and you love Quantum Leap, so I'm curious to hear about your thoughts around quantum mechanics and consciousness and yogis and the quantum field, because I used to love that particular show, which was definitely dealing with that same concept. But before I get to that serious stuff around quantum leaps and quantum mechanics, do I have to forgive, since you're in Philadelphia, do I have to forgive the Philadelphia 76ers for firing my former schoolmate and I would still consider him a close acquaintance, Doc Rivers, and everything, because I do know that y'all did that recently and everything, and I'm not sure how I'm feeling about that as a more of a Doc Rivers fan than a Philadelphia 76ers fan, and I do know that forgiveness is important, so I guess I have to forgive them, even though I wasn't not too pleased with that decision that they made there in the sports world. And I don't know if you follow sports or not.
No, I don't. Let's see that. There you go. Now we have two subjects that I can't comment on: is fashion and sports.
Gotcha. That is fair enough. But like I said, I was just curious, because I was going like, forgiveness. I don't know if I can forgive them or not. But on the serious side, the quantum field is a very important thing out there. And like I said, I did remember watching the Quantum Leap television show and all in that space. But a lot of people would go like yogis, quantum physics, quantum field yogis. They don't seem like they are connected, but apparently there is a connection between them, just like there's a connection between consciousness and quantum mechanics. So for those that are watching now and in team replay and everything else, as we like to call it, what is the connection and how is quantum dealing with our modern day everyday life, because a lot of people, that when they think of quantum, that's the first thing that will come to their mind is that particular pop TV show that was out there several years ago.
Okay, so what happened with me was that I had, I mean, okay, so my faith is unflappable. Okay, however, I needed a proof. I needed. Can I silence this for a second?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No problem.
Okay, so quantum. So when I first started writing the book, even though I'm a true believer, I was curious on how these events could happen in our physical world.
Right.
So I decided that I needed to study quantum mechanics, and it helped. But what's fascinating to me is that, and scientists still haven't proven it's something that, because you can't see it. So here are these very scientists that are atheists because you don't see what you believe in, then turn around and are believe in the quantum world. Mm-hmm. So when you really start, it quantum plays tricks on you. Okay, so for example, there's a steel beam. Okay, so the question is this solid? Mm-hmm. And of course, you're going to say yes, this is solid. Right. But when you really see the particles involved that are waves so it's really not in reality, it's a bunch of little waves that behave a certain way to trick us into thinking that this beam is solid. So and so it's a lot of this quantum sort of happens with this consciousness. And the yogis, and that's been, mysticism has fascinated me. And, one of the influencers on my influencers page, and people could go on it, it's sophiademas.com, and it's my influencers, because these modern physicists like Michio Kaku, okay, like they'll get on YouTube and say, oh, very soon now, because of quantum mechanics, we will be able to bilocate and disappear and reappear, and I'm like, well, but the yogis have been doing this kind of thing for thousands of years. Mm-hmm. And I had also heard that there were these Greek Orthodox monks that kind of did this bilocation in Greece and Mount Athos, and also Russian Orthodox monks off the coast of Alaska. So I really wanted to learn about this. So I did for 2 months. I just tried research. There's this one book, and I believe the name is The Silence of the Mountain, or Mountain of Silence, and it's all hearsay. Okay, so it talks about these monks who would kind of do these sort of manipulate consciousness. I don't know. Have you ever read Autobiography of a Yogi?
I've heard of the book. I haven't read it personally, but I've heard of the book. Yes.
Okay, because that it's a great book on that. So just when I gave up on this, the Greek Orthodox monks, trying to find out about, why they're doing it. Well, the book actually, the Silence of the Mountain, said something that, it's not something that is talked about amongst monks so that they don't appear that they're full of themselves, you know. So just when I gave up, I meet Abbess Emeliani, and her story of excuse me, bilocation is absolutely phenomenal. It is a firsthand story. So, you know, these are just mysteries, and some people are, you know, have through their spiritual journey have gone to a place where they can perform these paranormal things.
Yeah. It seems like that's been going on for a while because there were definitely people that still to this day believe that certain people that were being exploited literally had the ability to literally fly away. And that's, I mean, that's the popular narrative of a certain gospel songs that exist out of the slave narrative. But then I've heard some people say that that could have actually been a truism, that there might actually be people that were able to levitate themselves away from those very negative situations. And as I wasn't there, I can't either prove it one way or the other and everything. But I was just wondering, are some of these miracles that we hear about too impossible for our human mind to take into account that they could have been reality and all in
Well,
that
you
space?
know, you're talking, I mean, with me, it's like I will believe anything because of what I've experienced.
Right.
So, you know, I certainly, you know, these yogis have been doing this for many, you know, millennia. Why wouldn't I believe? Why wouldn't I believe that it's possible?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I can definitely think that it's possible as well. And sometimes people are getting excited about some of the newer technology because the newer technology they are saying allows them to do what maybe the miracles had already been allowing people to do. Because I know a lot of people have been excited about the notion of augmented reality and other parts of that because it is allowing them to escape to places that maybe they can escape to using the more traditional methods of miracles and all in that space. Not to say that those are not maybe a modern day miracle or a scientific miracle of some sort or another, but it definitely is interesting when you hear people that are using those as escapes that maybe they could use their spiritual connection to have similar escapes. But I'd love to hear your thoughts
So,
about it.
I'm sorry. What kind of reality is this?
Augmented reality, like those people that are going into other parts of the world. Some people would call it the metaverse or other things, but it's kind of like those folks that are wearing those headsets and are able to transport themselves in their mind outside of their modern day dimensions.
I don't think I can talk on that.
Okay, that is more than fair. What are some of the things that you have learned, and we're going to wind down and see you didn't think that the conversation would go that well, but I think it's been a very fun and enjoyable conversation, at least for my part, and I've learned a lot, and I have some reading that I've got to get to because you've given me some homework as well, and I do appreciate homework from my various guests. But what are some of the things that you have learned from your different jobs that you bring into your modern day life? Because you have mentioned and we've talked about some of these various jobs that you have had, but what are some of the things that have you have brought from those into what you are doing in the current times?
Well, I kind of touched on that. How, you know, at first it was more, you know, like wanting to in architecture school, just wanting to design the beautiful building. Okay,
Right.
and then, you know, shifting to using my knowledge of architecture to solve problems. You know, the problem. You know, creating space that you know is economical, or you know, and then the next thing was, you know, the dresses, and started out kind of superficial, you know, just beautiful dresses, but then no, it was for the problem figure that challenged me, and then it was how can I help people, more people. And so I think what happened with me is that the sort of the career um, journey is that what is important to me now is very different that was important to me then. It's to help people. And I think that's what happened with coming to write these 2 books, is that these things can happen. These have happened to me. And some of the miracles are like this bizarre coincidences that ended up giving me something at the end. And then there's what I would consider a pretty big one. There's healings that happened, and then there's my relationship with my husband. Okay, so it was I discovered early on, when I maybe 6 months into the relationship, that he had anger issues. I mean, he would just explode in rage, and I could just accidentally cross my eyes, and he took it that I was demeaning him or something. And then instead of going, what did you mean by that, or to qualify, he would go off. And the reason I stayed was because he would try to do whatever he could to better himself. He found a therapist. He found a men's group that were full of ragers. And then finally, I just had to say bye-bye because I could, Well, I moved out for a total of 6 months. And the last 3 incredible coincidences happened. One involved the Course in Miracles. The second one involved his wedding ring. And the third one is pretty amazing. But how we ended up with this kinesiology and the readings that she did for us in Hawaii. And so that was in 2009. We got back together, and he's transformed. He hasn't had one episode since 2009. I am now married to my dream companion.
Okay.
How does that work?
Yeah. Sometimes time and fate bring those dreams back to reality, and sometimes they are not meant to be there at the time that you initially get them, and then you have to they have to go through their change and evolution and all in that space, and then they come back as the dream person that you were originally thinking that you were getting in the first place. But they had to do some inner workings, it sounds like, and all in that space to get themselves together.
See, but again, I have to say that in this case, once again, I will repeat this because it's very important, that the universe, this divine intelligence, and this is a great way to end this, because this great intelligence knew better than me, because I said, I don't want to ever see this jerk again. Okay. Mm-hmm. But this intelligence knew what was best for me better than me. And by introducing these coincidences and me taking action on them, healed this relationship to, being with this most wonderful person, So my thing, and I'm going to say it to you, this fear of you're having maybe going into a relationship. Mm-hmm. I mean, my situation was perfect because I did not want to get married.
Right.
I did not want children, and I did not want to write a book. And I was very successful against marriage until I was 45. That's when I got married. And so now against my will, I got a husband. He was a jerk, and then he became absolutely wonderful and spiritual. And then I ended up adopting my daughter, and that's a miracle, and writing the book. So you can have your fears, but ask for help.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Definitely have to ask for help on a regular basis and everything. I know some folks that are watching will probably be trying to figure out as they're hearing you talk about coincidences. There is this notion of deja vu, and I've definitely run across that. So as we're heading out the door, I just had one question I get everybody to answer, and that's a very hopefully quick question. But to those that are, before I get to that one, before those that are listening, what do you see as the difference between deja vu and coincidences? Coincidences, because a lot of people will just write off a coincidence as a deja vu moment.
I don't know about to me a deja vu. It's something I just can't really talk about. I've had deja vu moments, and I don't know if it's something that I'm reliving from this lifetime or another lifetime, but I don't see a deja vu moment as a coincidence if it's that kind of an experience, really.
Yeah, that makes sense and everything. The thing that I get that everybody to answer, and you actually alluded to it earlier, but if folks are wanting to hear about some of these other influencers, because I was really impressed with a couple of them that I saw, including Rosa Smith, I believe was the name that I saw in there and everything. And there were some other ones, including a gentleman that was a Greek theologian that I will definitely be looking up as I saw some of these influencers. But if folks are wanting to go to your website, where could they find you on the web, and how can they reach out to you if they've been enthralled by this conversation and want to learn more about Sophia Demas and all in that space? And last but not least, everybody that comes on, I am very much a believer in positive thought and healing in a world that needs as much of that as we can give it. So I try to get all my guests to give their message of positivity and hope. And I think a lot of your work is actually in this field. But if there is a specific message of positivity and hope that you can share with our global audience, I'm sure that it would be appreciated. And that's kind of something that I do on a regular basis to try to build that bridge in my own unique way and conquer some of these divides that exist and all in that space. So if you could tell folks how they can reach you and any message of positivity and hope that you would like to share with our audience.
Well, to me, I am absolutely full of hope because of my belief system. Okay, when I believe that this divine intelligence wants us to be happy and find our true purpose and works for us and with us, I feel I can honestly say I'm sublimely happy. I just feel I'm in this I don't know, space with just these things that actually keep happening. And then even just recently, a number of things happened to have this book, kind of promoted. And these scientists that, how I got to know them. And so I've been invited by it's the Scientific and Medical Network out of the UK as one of the 15. I'm the only non-scientist in this group that we are planning to, we are going to present a synchronicity summit roundtable. And as being the only non-scientist, that was, I can't believe it, how these things happened. So, but at the same time, I see that I had no fear of contacting some of these scientists. So all of my message is, okay, you can just stick where just in wishful thinking, and then you just keep wishing and you don't take action and you just keep wishing. And then you move into a different level of hope, like, oh, that's a interesting coincidence. I will take action and hope that something comes out of it. But then you come to another level, and that is from the perspective of faith. And you just have faith, and it's not is it going to happen or isn't it going to happen? You just know that the best will happen, and this faith is what drives me. And I know that I'm not the only possessor of this faith. Anyone can get to that.
Well, I greatly appreciate it. I know our listeners will appreciate it as well. We're going to get out with a couple of public service announcements, one about the veterans and all along those lines. But I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and I will definitely try to grab those books that you recommended. And I look forward to hopefully having you come back in the near future on Pod TV and sharing more of your wisdom as well. So I definitely enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. But we'll definitely try to get you back. No problem.
How you holding up? Nothing wrong with getting help.
If I promise to look into it, will you drop it and help me build this fence?
Now you need my help.
If you or a veteran you know needs support, don't wait. Reach out. Find resources at va.gov/reach.